Most people never master anything. Not a skill, not a craft, not even themselves. They start with passion and end with excuses. They buy the books, the courses, the tools, and a few months later it all gathers dust. And when they see someone who does reach mastery, the athlete who moves like water, the musician who becomes one with sound, the entrepreneur who turns vision into empire, they call it talent. They whisper, "He was born with it." But that's a lie. No one is born a master. They are forged, slowly, painfully, through a process the modern world has forgotten. The samurai had a word for that process: Shuhari, the three invisible stages between imitation and transcendence, between ego and emptiness, between trying and becoming. Chapter 1. Shu, the death of self. It begins not with ambition but with surrender. In feudal Japan, a young apprentice named Renji arrived at the mountain forge of Master Kaien, a man whose skill with the blade was said to border on the divine. Renji was hungry, not for food, but for identity. He wanted to become a samurai, to be recognized, respected, remembered. He wanted mastery. But what he carried was ego. The first thing Kaien did was take away his sword. "Until your hands are ready," he said, "you will swing this." He handed Renji a wooden stick. For the first month, Renji chopped wood. For the second, he carried water. And by the third, his body moved like a ghost through the same motions. Lift, swing, breathe, repeat. He grew bitter. "When will I learn the way of the sword?" he asked. Kaien looked up from the forge. "You already are." Renji didn't understand. Not yet. He thought he was being punished, but Kaien was teaching him the first stage of Shuhari. Shu, to obey. To obey means to let the ego die, to become clay again, unshaped, unopinionated, ready to receive form. Neuroscientists call this stage neural mirroring, when the brain learns through mimicry and repetition. At this stage, thinking slows you down. Every time you question the motion, you break the pattern your brain is trying to form. The cerebellum, the part of your brain responsible for automatic mastery, doesn't care about pride. It only cares about repetition. 300 correct movements start the pattern. 1,000 perfect repetitions make it automatic. That's why Kaien made Renji swing the wooden sword 10,000 times. He wasn't training muscle, he was training memory. The death of the self that resists obedience. Weeks passed, then months. And one dawn, as Renji was splitting wood, he stopped feeling the weight of the stick. It moved on its own. His breath and motion had fused. The rhythm of the swing had become prayer. Kaien watched from afar and nodded. "You've stopped fighting the movement," he said. "Now it lives in you." That is the meaning of Shu. When the movement becomes you before you even understand it. When imitation becomes instinct, and the ego, silent. Chapter 2. Ha! The breaking of form. The next morning, Kaien drew a circle in the sand. "This was Shu," he said. "You lived within this circle, Banam, my rules, my form, my control. Now you must break it." Renji blinked. "Break it?" Kaien nodded. "Yes, but not through rebellion, through understanding." This was the second stage of mastery. Ha! The breaking of form. It is when obedience evolves into adaptation. Kaien sent Renji to study under another master, a rival with a completely different style. Where Kaien was precise and patient, the new teacher was wild and unpredictable. One taught stillness before strike, the other taught strike before thought. At first, Renji's mind fractured. Every movement contradicted the last. Every lesson canceled another. He felt like he was unlearning everything he knew. But slowly, patterns emerged beneath the chaos. He saw that both masters were teaching the same invisible law: efficiency of energy, clarity of presence. That realization shattered the illusion of right and wrong. There was no single path, only principles beneath technique. This is where mastery becomes dangerous, because most people stop here. They taste freedom and mistake it for mastery. They call themselves innovators when they've only learned how to combine other people's ideas. A study from Kyoto University revealed that at this point in learning, the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for analysis, begins to quiet down. Your instincts start to lead. You make faster, cleaner decisions. But if you stop here, you become skilled, not transcendent. You are a craftsman, not yet a master. Ha is the stage of breaking forms without breaking purpose. It's where rebellion matures into wisdom. You stop worshiping the technique and start seeing the principle beneath it. Kayan saw the change in Renji's eyes. "You're beginning to understand," he said. "When you can fight in two opposite ways and still remain yourself, the circle is broken." Chapter 3. The Dissolution of Thought. Years passed. Renji's movements had become liquid. He no longer thought of stances, forms, or footwork. They had become instinct, as natural as breath. One evening, Kayan challenged him without warning. No ritual, no preparation. The master simply drew his blade and in a blur of silver, struck. Renji's body reacted before his mind did. Steel met steel. He didn't choose to block. It just happened. He didn't think counter. The counter emerged. When it was over, Kayan's sword stopped a hair's width from Renji's neck. The old man smiled. "You didn't fight me," he said. "You flowed with me." This was the dissolution of thought, the final stage of Shuhari, where the self disappears and what remains is pure response. Neurologically, something extraordinary occurs here. In elite performers, martial artists, musicians, surgeons, brain scans show a phenomenon called transient hypofrontality. The prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that overthinks, shuts down. The conscious self, the voice that doubts, hesitates, labels, goes silent. Flow takes over. Movement, perception, and timing merge into one continuous awareness. It's no longer you doing the action. It's the action doing you. This is the paradox of mastery. The more you try, the less you become. The less you try, the more mastery flows through you. Kayan spoke softly. When the student disappears, mastery appears. Renji didn't fully understand, but he felt it. That night, as rain whispered over the temple roof, he trained alone in the courtyard. His body moved like a shadow dancing with itself. Every strike, every pivot, every breath was effortless. And for the first time, he felt no need to prove anything. He had become the movement. That's the secret of It's not about control, it's about surrender. Chapter 4. The Science of Transcendence. To the samurai, mastery looked like spirit, but what they called spirit, science now calls neuroplasticity. Every repetition reshapes the brain. Every strike carves new pathways between will and motion. At first, those pathways are fragile, like footsteps in soft sand. But through repetition, they become roads, then reflex. The body learns what the mind can't yet explain. Modern neuroscience calls this procedural memory, when skill migrates from thought to instinct. That's why masters seem effortless. Their movements aren't controlled by thinking, they're released by it. In brain scans of elite performers, something remarkable happens. The prefrontal cortex, the part that analyzes and hesitates, goes quiet. Psychologists call it transient hypofrontality, the silence before perfection. It's the moment when the self disappears and only pure awareness remains. The samurai called this state mushin, the mind without mind. It's not emptiness, it's absolute presence. Renji no longer thought of each strike or breath. He had entered the current of something larger, where movement, timing, and awareness became one continuous flow. This is transcendence, not a miracle, a mechanism. When repetition becomes meditation and thought dissolves into instinct, the body stops asking how and simply becomes. Chapter 5. The Mirror of the Modern Age. Look around. We live in an age where everyone wants to master everything, and yet no one masters anything. We have access to more knowledge than the greatest scholars of history, and less discipline than a child with a wooden sword. The world has traded depth for dopamine. YouTube replaces the dojo. Shortcuts replace silence. People jump from one passion to another, mistaking movement for progress. They say, "I'm just experimenting." But the truth is simpler. They're escaping the boredom that mastery demands. The modern mind fears repetition because repetition kills ego. It reveals how ordinary we truly are. That's why most people never enter Shu, the first stage, the stage of humility. They want freedom before form, creativity before discipline, and results before repetition. Psychologists call it the illusion of progress. The belief that gathering knowledge equals growth. But knowing 1,000 techniques means nothing if none of them live in your body. It's mental clutter disguised as intelligence. Renji once asked his master, "Why do so many warriors fail?" The old man replied, "Because they cannot endure the boredom required to transcend it." Boredom is the gatekeeper of transformation. Every master, whether swordsman or scientist, has stood before that gate and refused to leave. They practiced when it was no longer exciting, when no one was watching, when improvement was invisible. That's the test the modern world keeps failing. People mistake stimulation for mastery, but mastery lives in monotony. In the same strike done 1,000 times until thought disappears. In the quiet hours where no praise comes, no reward appears, and only the sound of your own discipline remains. The digital age has made us experts at beginnings and amateurs at endurance. But the ancient way has never changed. You don't rise by chasing what's new. You rise by repeating what's true. Chapter 6, The Return. When Renji grew old, apprentices began coming to him. They called him the man who flowed like wind. But when they asked, "Master, how many techniques do you know?" he would always answer, "None." They thought he was being humble, but he meant it. He no longer fought with technique, he was the technique. In his final lesson, Renji told his students, "The fool seeks freedom from discipline. The wise find freedom through discipline." And then he smiled, the same way Kayan once had, and said, "There is no mastery without surrender. There is no surrender without repetition." He died standing, sword in hand, eyes open, breath steady, the way only a man without fear could. Closing reflection, the path of Shuhari. Shuhari isn't just about martial arts, it's the blueprint for mastering anything. Shu, you obey, you copy, you let go of your ego and learn with humility. Ha, you break, you experiment, adapt, and make the knowledge your own. Re, you dissolve, you move beyond thought, beyond effort, beyond fear. You don't play the instrument anymore, the music plays through you. You don't speak the language anymore, the words arise naturally. You don't chase success anymore, you become what success requires. That is the way of Shuhari. The ancient path that turns repetition into instinct, obedience into originality, and discipline into transcendence. And if you have the courage to walk it, not just read about it, then years from now you'll look back and realize, no, you didn't just master a skill, you mastered yourself.